This is the only review I've ever genuinely dreaded. Sonichu? I love Sonichu. Shin, loads of fun. Every movie I've watched up to this point has been at least a decent time. My girlfriend dumped me in the middle of working on the Sir Billy review, and I didn't dread working on that like I've dreaded this. So, strap in, motherfuckers. It's time for a cinematic assassination. Tonight on Bad Reviews, it's motherfucking Food Fight.
My name is Daniel Steckley, and my obsession is failure. I believe that the secrets to success lie in understanding the mistakes of the past. I'm on a mission to investigate the greatest flops, bombs, and busts in every form of media. From movies to television, music to video games, anime and comics too, the things I review are diverse, but they all have one thing in common. They've all had some very, very bad reviews.
The most astonishing thing to me when I rewatched Food Fight for this review was that it only clocks in at 87 minutes. I was absolutely convinced and had told people that Food Fight is 2 hours long. I was as sure of Food Fight being 2 hours long as I am sure of my hair being brown. So needless to say, Food Fight has some pacing problems. It also has some acting problems and some writing problems, and this movie has a lot of problems. To make things more organized, I'm going to sort the problems into sections, because that will also help me edit this review when it inevitably comes out 3 hours long. Problem number 1, a feature-length commercial. Let's start by talking about the background of the movie, because, like with Manos, it's almost more interesting to talk about than the movie itself. Food Fight is more of a scam than an actual film. It is probably the closest that real life will ever get to replicating the producers. The origins of Food Fight date back to the 90s, specifically to Toy Story. Toy Story was, as you obviously know, a hugely successful animated film that happened to be chock full of product placement as a natural consequence of what it was about. Now, Toy Story wouldn't have necessarily needed product placement, but it was a part of the charm of the film to see familiar toys personified and interacting with each other. And it's no coincidence that Toy Story hugely boosted sales of the real-world toys featured. Larry Kasanoff, CEO of Threshold Entertainment, looked at this and smelled opportunity. What if, he imagined, you could build an entire movie around product placement, except instead of being about toys, which exist in the real physical world, you make it about supermarket brand mascots, which exist as images on the sides of boxes. What could go wrong? Problem number 2. Everything goes wrong. From nearly the first minute, Food Fight is a completely incoherent film. The problem with making a movie about brand mascots, which don't exist in any physical way, is that you gotta decide how they exist together. But world building is for nerds, so instead Food Fight launches into a musical number. It's our world. It's my life. Everything is corporate. Everything is cool when you're hawking shit. We are shown a parade of characters, only a tiny handful of whom are real-world brand mascots, and none of whom will matter in the plot. Like, you thought the opening montages in Suicide Squad was bad? Imagine if that movie had opened with a 3-minute music video introducing you to the various prison guards, and you'll understand a little bit of what the opening to Food Fight is like. And yeah, you're probably noticing right now, that's not a brand mascot. That's not a brand mascot. That's an abomination unto the Lord. See, the thing about Food Fight is that despite it being product placement in the movie, there's not a whole lot of real-world product placement in this movie. None of the major characters are real-world brand mascots. None. And that was sort of the plan. See, Food Fight never actually got any money for its product placement. The deal was that when the movie was released, the various brands featured would publicize the movie, basically by putting Food Fight branding on their products or stuff like that. The thing is, Threshold never really released Food Fight. Food Fight had one of the most troubled production cycles of modern times. Remember how I said that production started in the 90s? Food Fight was released in 2012, 10 years after its originally planned release date. This is the Duke Nukem Forever of movies. The original plan was to finance the movie the way that Canon used to, half with a seed investment and half with pre-sales to foreign markets. Things went down the shitter in a hurry. Threshold missed deadline after deadline, and eventually their investors invoked a clause in their contract which allowed an insurance company to come in and essentially cut together what was already finished into something like a movie. It got a meager release in Europe and went straight to DVD in North America, with none of the tie-in branding materializing. Foodfight wasn't released, it was evicted. Production was disorganized at the best of times. Kasanoff insisted on acting as director despite having no experience as a film director, let alone experience supervising an animated feature. And in December of 2002, the movie was stolen. Seriously, the movie was stolen. Hard drives containing most of the work done up to that point were stolen from Threshold's offices, and a year later, work began again on the movie from scratch with an entirely new animation style. The original plan was for Foodfight to use squash and stretch animation, like the old Looney Tunes cartoons, and given how some of the animation in the finished film looks, that would have been an unending nightmare from the pit of hell. But after production restarted, Kasanoff decided that he wanted the film to have a more realistic style, with animation informed by primitive performance capture. The only problem? The animators had no idea how to work with this. According to a New York Times article, the performance capture software that Foodfight utilized required the actors to stand perfectly still and look straight forward, which... fucking what? At that point, what are you even capturing? The lip sync?
And you can bet the Copa Banana's gonna be buzzing tonight.
If true, this is astonishing, because it means that the only detail actually being captured was facial expressions, and as you may be able to tell from the footage that I'm showing you right now, only a tiny handful of characters in this movie even have human faces. Which brings us to the next problem. Problem number 3, an unrelenting nightmare from the pit of hell. Foodfight has some of the worst animation ever produced. It is the worst I've ever seen from an American production company, period. And if you compare it to other stuff Threshold has done, it doesn't even look like the same company. They worked on this thing for 12 years, and it looks like it could run in real time on a PS2.
Ew! Oh, this is just great.
And the blame probably falls on the bizarre production pipeline Kasanoff insisted upon. The animators received the rudimentary performance capture and had to hammer it into something more dynamic looking without just throwing it all out and starting from scratch. The result is animation that's weird and clunky and herky-jerky just so that there's something interesting going on in the shot. The movie never totally commits to the more realistic animation style Kasanoff wanted. There are these incredibly disruptive cartoony moments that I'm guessing were left in because they were written that way in the script. The animators not knowing how to work with the performance capture also resulted in the characters, which lean more on the performance capture, looking nightmarish. Sunshine Goodness is a horrifying creature from beyond the 9th dimension, but still she's somehow not the most terrifying character in this movie. That goes to Christopher Lloyd's character, who moves by Harlem shaking from place to place.
And do the Harlem Shake.
I know I already compared the look of this movie to a PS2 game, but it truly does look like somebody strung together a bunch of game cutscenes into a movie. The shot framing is total amateur hour, with zero attempt made to work around the shoddy sparseness of the world. The animators also thought that this was a clever character design. In this movie designed to push supermarket brands, this is the only image we see of how this movie views people who shop at supermarkets. Which brings us to the next problem. Problem number 4. Fuck capitalism.
Hungry, tough guy?
Hiya, kitten.
How about we get Chef Boyardee to make us a huge, feast-amongst dinner?
If Bill Hicks had lived to see this movie, it would have killed him anyway. Foodfight doesn't have much competition for the title of most shamelessly mercenary film ever made, but what's galling is just how bad it is at being mercenary. Almost zero screen time is devoted to actually promoting or positively portraying the real-world brands featured. Foodfight is much more preoccupied with dunking on the brands that told them to fuck off. Chester the Cheetah becomes Cheezel the Weasel, a scummy back alley hustler who sells sex dolls out of his jacket, but more on that later. The Chiquita Banana Lady becomes Lola Frutola, who is the worst thing this film can imagine a woman being: overweight. The Not Keebler elves get their tree crashed into by a plane, and the Brawny Man becomes, well, this. In fact, only 2 real-world brand mascots have speaking lines at all, and they're both blink and you miss it. Charlie Tuna has 1 line in the nightclub scene and then never appears again, and Mrs. Buttersworth has a handful of lines and plays a very minor role in the final fight. Let's just look at the poster for a minute. So, right away, without reading anything, this poster is full of lies. It shows the real-world brand mascots front and center, which is not remotely accurate to the film. Also, the Vlasic stork is basically an extra, and Twinkie the Kid doesn't appear in the movie at all. That's right, a character who is not in the movie is featured more prominently on the poster than the protagonist. The poster also shows action going on outdoors, which never happens. It also implies the mascots are roughly human-sized. They are not. The poster also mentions Hilary Duff, despite her being more of a plot point than a character, and Wayne Brady's part being much, much larger. And finally, at the bottom of the poster, we get a list of the various brands which the movie wanted to especially feature, and it is also wrong. Chef Boyardee is name dropped, but he never appears on screen, and the Chiquita Banana Lady, well, I already told you about how she sure as shit ain't in this fucking movie. And if you aren't actually gonna try to leverage these brands, then what's even the point? It's like marketing an Adam Sandler movie entirely around those random distracting celebrity cameos. So now that we've talked about what a miserable job Foodfight does of actually selling brand name products, let's talk about how it associates generic brand products with the actual father-fucking Nazis. The plot to the movie, such as it is, revolves around the world of Marketropolis being invaded by Brand X, a common name for store brand products. This would be offensive if it weren't so obvious. It's something that would come off much more strongly as consumerist propagandizing if it actually felt like Foodfight had some skin in the game. If the world of brand mascots had been more idealized or romanticized or portrayed as anything positive or worthwhile, then no-name products being literal Nazi invaders would have had more oomph. But Marketropolis isn't some idyllic Eden where mascots frolic and play. It's a city with robberies and threats of murder. I'm gonna kill you! And dingy back alleyways where sleazy weasels peddle sex.
Perhaps you desire a companion for those lonely bachelor nights. Then here's good news.
Which brings us to the next problem. Problem number 5. Let's get chip-faced. One of the things bound to take you by surprise when you watch Foodfight is just how hideously inappropriate for children it is. And it's not just a handful of adult moments like in a DreamWorks movie. No, Foodfight is constantly, unrelentingly adult. Let's go through a rundown of all the things that happen in Foodfight that should never, ever happen in a movie for children. Threats of murder. I'm gonna kill you! Nipple jokes.
It warms my heart the way you love my raisins, tough guy.
Catcalling women from a plane.
Oh, nice packaging. How about some chocolate frosting?
Torture. Torture with a horrific drill weapon. Use of the word chip-faced.
You better go easy on the potato juice before you get chip-faced.
A schoolgirl outfit seduction scene. A sex doll. Nazi imagery. Holocaust imagery. Implications of gay molestation. Charlie Sheen. Problem number 6. The plot. Yup, we're this far in and I have not yet mentioned the main character's name. Charlie Sheen plays Dex Dog Detective with all the conviction of a man just here for the paycheck so he can cover a few more of his porn star HIV blackmail expenses. Dex is the mascot for the fictional Cinnamon Sleuth cereal, which Larry Kasanoff had delusions of actually becoming a product if the movie was successful. The slogan is presumably, "The secret's inside," because that's something that Dex keeps saying like it's some kind of clever one-liner. Dex is a private eye, and by a private eye I mean he's the only law enforcement in the city. He's dating Sunshine Goodness, a raisin mascot played by Hilary Duff, who was no older than 15 when she recorded her lines.
It warms my heart the way you love my raisins, tough guy.
Dex is about to propose to Sunshine, who, again, is played by a 15-year-old girl, when she inexplicably disappears. At this point, the movie becomes Casablanca.
Of all the produce bars and all the supermarkets in all the world, she had to walk into mine.
Because obviously...
Play it.
But boss,
I said, play it.
There is absolutely no reason for La Marseillaise to be played here. It's not even a reference joke, it's just a full-scene plagiarism of Casablanca. Which, like, why Casablanca? If Manos felt like a bit from a Christopher Guest movie, then Foodfight is straight out of The Simpsons. It would be a great caricature of a kids movie made by people who have no idea what kids like, if that wasn't what it actually is. The mix of condescension, inappropriate humor, and aping a classic movie in pursuit of artistic legitimacy is totally something The Simpsons would think of. So back to the plot. Brand X begins invading Marketropolis, murdering and replacing brand mascots, or Ikes, as this movie refers to them. It's short for icons, but the movie never explains that, and the jargon just reinforces how poorly thought out the world building is. This thinly sketched world building comes to a head when Dex launches a plan to travel across the market during the day. This is the point where the movie is just flying by the seat of its pants. So let's take a break from discussing the plot and stop for a moment to discuss the world building. Problem number 7, the world building. The world of Foodfight is incredibly thinly sketched and poorly conceived. This is probably a result of trying to fit the square peg of supermarket brand mascots into the round hole of Toy Story. I'm a fucking idiot. Toy Story has a holistic, coherent setup. When you aren't looking, your toys are alive. They're aware of their existence as toys, and their primary goal in life is to bring you happiness, though they also have relationships with each other. But all of their social structures and values ultimately revolve around being toys. The plots to the Toy Story movies all revolve around how the toys deal with their society and each other. They're all about the psychology of being a toy. Foodfight tries to ape some of the trappings of Toy Story without the same uniformity of purpose. The mascots only come alive at night when the market is closed and no one can see them, so presumably convenience store mascots are stuck in a never-ending purgatory. But the Ikes never do anything that relates to them embodying a brand. They just have this city where they live independent adult lives. The connection between the real world and the Ike world at first appears to be that events in the real world affect the Ike world metaphorically. So when Brand X products arrive in the store, their mascots arrive in Marketropolis. But then things get messy. Dex realizes that the only way to defeat Brand X will be to mount a product recall, and to do that, he has to physically go to the manager's office and send an email. In the real world. And this is where shit starts to get incredibly confusing, because at the start of the movie, we see the store physically transform into Marketropolis, and the Ikes talk about needing to wrap up their activities by dawn so that people don't see them. And the movie climaxes with what is basically a human rampaging through Marketropolis.
and do the Harlem Shake.
So, all of this stuff exists physically, by magic or something? Nothing is ever explained. The only world details that ever get discussed out loud are the ones they just lifted from Toy Story. It's not an, oh, if you stop and think about it, it doesn't really make much sense kind of thing. It constantly beats you over the head when you're watching this movie. It makes the plot impossible to follow because no ground rules are ever set. Nothing makes any sense, and if you can't understand what's going on, you can't possibly get invested in anything that's happening, and oh my gosh. Oh, this is the worst. This is the worst.
I shoot less at you.
So, in the end, it's revealed that Sunshine Goodness disappeared because she was recalled by Brand X, because apparently products can be recalled by other companies now. And then it turns out that the Christopher Lloyd clipboard guy was actually a robot being piloted by Lady X. Fucking what? Is there a real Brand X at all? Because then it's revealed that Lady X is actually a prune mascot who was recalled for being an Uggo.
Sunshine Chip slapped her back the ugly.
Gross.
It doesn't have to end like this.
So, mascots can become mascots for other brands of their own free will and build robots to interact with humans? When did this become Small Soldiers? Foodfight is one of the most incoherent films I've ever seen. It doesn't give a hot gay fuck about world building, and then writes a story steeped in the details of the world it forgot to build. It's becoming a cliche to say that a movie runs on dream logic, but Foodfight really does operate like a dream, making up details on the fly and assuming that you understand implicitly how a nonsensical system works. It's dreamlike even down to the time dilation. Which brings us to problem number 8, the pacing. Pacing is one of the finickiest things in movie making, and it's usually one of the first things to go wrong with a bad movie. But even by the standards of bad movies, Foodfight has some of the most bizarre pacing problems I've ever seen. Like I said before I rewatched this movie for the review, I was 100% convinced that it was 2 hours long. Also, when I rewatched Foodfight for this review, I slept through almost the entire third act, and I missed nothing.
That was a perfectly good bag of chips.
Survival of the fittest, Leonard.
Never opened. Never enjoyed.
The first 2/3 of Foodfight are alternatingly rushed and lethargic. Like Manos, it's a case of not having enough story to make it to feature length. But unlike Manos, instead of padding it with junk footage, they pad out the runtime with an ending battle that goes on for over half an hour, taking up a third of the movie. And unfortunately, it might be just about the worst final battle ever in a movie. So let's talk for a minute about why Foodfight's final battle lacks everything that makes a battle scene exciting. Number 1, investment in the characters. I don't give a shit if any of these bastards live or die, so that's out. And beyond failure to make likable characters, the final fight is where Foodfight tries to make the real-world brand mascots finally show up and do something. There are only 3 characters in this battle that have participated in the plot thus far, but they're allowed to fade into the ensemble so that Mrs. Buttersworth can get her moment of ass-kicking glory. Because you know what makes me want to buy shitty breakfast syrup is thinking that I'm watching a student project recreation of Josh on the Big Wall. Number 2, building tension. Nope. Where a good battle scene might show each side getting affected by the other's attack and how it affects its ability to keep fighting, in Foodfight we just see the 2 sides trade blows, then some kind of reaction to getting hit, and then repeat with no impact. There isn't a back and forth where one side or the other appears to be taking the upper hand. It all just plays out like a Final Fantasy battle, and it goes on for half an hour. Number 3, exciting finish. The final battle just sort of peters out after the movie finally reaches an acceptable running time. It ends with an awkward fistfight in the middle of a deserted street, and however I try to describe it in words always makes it sound better than it is. Sunshine Goodness, a character who hasn't appeared since the first 10 minutes of the film, is the one to finish off the baddie, because hitting women is where Foodfight finally draws the line, and because it totally doesn't devalue your villain to have her beaten up by Charlie Sheen's child bride. Problem number 9, the part of the video where I earn my dislikes. Foodfight is unrelentingly casually misogynistic, in that Hollywood producer way where women are decoration valuable only for their looks and sexual harassment is no big deal. In Foodfight, female value is inextricably tied with both beauty and youth. Sunshine Goodness is good because she is pretty, allegedly.
It warms my heart the way you love my
and because she is jailbait. This Brand X mascot is evil because she is old and ugly. The shopping lady is bad because she is old and ugly. Lady X is at first appealing because she is adult and sexual, but she is revealed at the end to have been old and ugly the entire time. This is not subtle. Even if you're the biggest gamer-gator out there and you think Anita Sarkeesian is full of shit, you have to concede that a movie where all of the good women are young and pretty and virginal, and all of the evil women are old and ugly and slutty might, just might, be misogynistic. At one point, one of the heroes, Daredevil Dan, catcalls a woman from an airplane. This isn't a character moment. This doesn't establish anything that's picked up later, and it's not a funny joke. The only reason the scene is left in the movie is because the script originally called for it to be Little Debbie, but that company quite reasonably said no. So, first off, the script called for Little Debbie to be catcalled as some kind of sick gag, and that scene was left in the movie because apparently Larry Kasanoff thinks that catcalling is just inherently funny.
How about some chocolate frosting?
See, now I know I'm inevitably going to get that one comment that's like, a cartoon character doesn't actually have an age. Which is, I think at this point everybody knows that that's just code for I spank it to lolicon, right? And before any of you fuckers bring up Winry, okay, that was a joke. Like, it wasn't a particularly well-executed joke at any point, but it was a joke. Like, self-deprecating humor has been my stock in trade since DStecks on Location, okay? Which was where that gag was originally set up. Like, it was supposed to be like, I'm this fucking loser with a waifu, okay? That wasn't unironic. I mean, did I do a good job of establishing that it wasn't unironic? No, I did a really poor job, okay? That was on me, okay? But, I'm not even sure where I'm going with this. Don't catcall Little Debbie from an airplane. I'm sorry, I just cannot get over how cartoonishly misogynistic the big reveal at the end of this movie is. Like, it would be bad enough. It would be bad enough if Lady X was evil just because she's sexual, okay? That would be sexist as fuck, just on its own. But the movie goes a step beyond, and she was ugly and old the whole time, and her oldness and ugliness is inextricably tied up in why she's evil. Like, she used to be the mascot for a brand of prunes that got recalled because nobody wanted them, okay? So the movie's implying that her motivation this whole time was resentment. Lady X is evil because she refuses to accept that old women are ugly and should fuck off. That is the moral of Foodfight. Problem number 10. In conclusion, Foodfight is, so far, the worst movie I've ever reviewed. It is the worst movie I've ever seen from beginning to end on its own. That qualifier's in place because I'd say that the worst movie I've ever been exposed to was Red Zone Cuba on MST3K. But I've never watched it on its own terms. So, for now anyway, Foodfight is the worst movie I have ever seen. Foodfight has everything that makes a bad movie horrible, and none of the things that make a bad movie enjoyable. The acting is bad, but not laughably bad, just the work of actors who are talented but don't give a shit. The animation is amateurish, but not to the levels of Video Brinquedo where it becomes gobsmacking. And the script is bad, but not in a way that's weird, it's just hacky and cynical. Foodfight is a movie that set out to achieve very little and accomplishes even less. As a kids movie, it's despicable. As a comedy, it's unfunny. As an adventure, it's unexciting. And as a commercial, it's ineffective. That this movie set its sights on Toy Story is hubris in the extreme. And the bottom line is that even if this movie had been accomplished exactly as it was envisioned back in 2000, Foodfight was never going to be a success. Because the thing is, parents aren't exactly thrilled about the idea of taking their kids to the movie theater to watch a commercial for 90 minutes. That's the kind of thing you need to sell the kids on, so that they beg their parents to take them to go see the Transformers movie or the Ninja Turtles movie. No kid is ever gonna beg to go see the Charlie the Tuna movie, or the Vlasic Pickles movie, or the fucking Mr. Clean movie, not even the Twinkie the Kid movie. This is something that should have come up in the first few hours of discussing this idea, and somehow, at no point in the 12 years this movie was in production, did anybody at ever point say, wow, this is the stupidest fucking idea ever. Like, it makes about as much sense as making a movie out of fucking Tetris or something. So what's this Brain Trust's next project? Foodfight registers on the Suckville scale at a punishing 3. Where most good bad movies have an earnestness that gives them charm, Foodfight's shameless commercialism robs it of any true sense of failure. It isn't trying to be good. It fails as a movie and it fails as a commercial, with nothing but contempt for the audience to carry it through. Foodfight is a punishing sit, which is probably why it hasn't taken off as a classic bad movie, despite being really hyped around its release as the next great bad movie. Foodfight represents the upper limit of what constitutes a 3. If it were any worse, it would be at the death rating. But it has just enough bizarre and baffling moments to sustain at least one viewing. There's some bad movie entertainment to be wrung from Foodfight, but it's like panning for gold downriver from the sewage plant. I don't know why I keep saying next week at the end of these videos, since my schedule's become bi-weekly at best. Because I'm back to working full-time now, 48 hours a week, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break from bad reviews so I can focus on a couple side projects that I'm working on, which you guys will be hearing about before too long. But when I return, Bad Reviews will be diving into the wild, wild world of Neil Breen with his magnum opus, Fateful Findings. Until then, I'm Daniel Steckley, and this has been a Bad Review. I'd like to take a moment to thank by name Adam Ali, James Adair, Ian Wright, and Lyle Groniger for being such generous Patreon backers. If you'd like your name read aloud at the end of the show or featured in the credits, consider backing Bad Reviews at www.patreon.com/DStecks. And for those of you who already are backing the show, thank you all for your support.
I don't think it's because you're growing cold, but maybe